According to the Department of Statistics Malaysia, the country's inflation rate rose to 1.9% in October 2024, with the consumer price index reaching 133.4, up from 130.9 in the same period last year. Chief Statistician Datuk Sri Dr. Muhammad Uzair Mahidin attributed the increase to higher prices in key categories, including food and beverages, personal care, social protection and miscellaneous goods and services.
Hello everyone. Today we'd like to talk an issue that has become a hot topic in nowadays, which is inflation. So, inflation is a key economic concept that affects the cost of goods, services and government policies. This presentation today will discuss what inflation is, its types, causes, effects and how it can be controlled as it impacts individuals, businesses and governments alike. Let's meet the team. First of all, we have Haziq, Naim, me, Hanan, Amir and also Irfan. So let's discuss what is inflation. Inflation is the general rise in the price of goods and services over time. When inflation happens, the value of money decreases, meaning you can buy less with the same amount of money. For example, you may notice that the food, fuel and other related items cost more now than they did a year ago. This rise in price affects everyone, not only individuals, but also businesses by adjusting their costs and governments to create policies to manage its impact. Moving on to type of inflation. Demand pull inflation. This happens when there is too much demand for something but not enough supply. For example, if many students need dorm rooms but there aren't enough available, landlords can increase the rent because students are competing to get a room. Second, cost push inflation. This occurs when the cost to produce or deliver something goes up. For instance, if coffee beans or printing paper becomes more expensive, the campus cafe might charge more for coffee and the printing shop could raise the cost of printing assignments. And lastly, import inflation. This happens when imported goods becomes more expensive due to currency changes or higher international costs. For example, if the local currency weakens, items like imported laptops, textbooks or snacks may cost more for students to buy. Moving on to factors of inflation, there's global factors. First, rising oil price. Malaysia, being a net exporter of oil, is significantly affected by the fluctuation in crude oil price. When oil price rise, transportation cost increases, leading to higher logistics and distribution expenses. This, in turn, raises production costs across various industries, causing price of goods and service to escalate. Second, supply chain disruptions. Geopolitical conflicts, such as the war in Ukraine, disrupts the global supply of essential commodities like food, fuel and metals. These conflicts, combined with natural disasters and lingering effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, cause shortage in critical materials. This leads to delays and higher price for both raw materials and finished products, affecting business and consumers alike. And lastly, commodity price fluctuations. Changes in the price of food and raw materials driven by global factors like weather, anomalies and climate change directly contribute to inflation. For instance, droughts or floods can reduce agricultural output, push up food price. As food and raw materials form the backbone of many industries, this ripple effect causes inflation across the economy. Now, let's talk about domestic factors influencing inflation. Firstly, demand pull inflation. Malaysia's steady economic growth has increased consumer spending. When demand for goods and services rise faster than the available supply, businesses face pressure to increase prices. This phenomenon, known as demand pull inflation, is a natural result of growing purchasing power among Malaysians. Second, cost push inflation. Rising production costs, such as higher price for raw materials or increased wages due to labour shortage, contribute to cost push inflation. The labour shortage, worsened by restriction on foreign workers during the pandemic, have forced businesses to either pay higher wages or delay production, further driving up costs and prices. And lastly, exchange rate fluctuations. A weaker Malaysian ringgit increases the cost of imported goods, such as machinery, technology and essential commodities. As Malaysia depends on imports for many necessities, the higher import costs contribute to inflation, making everyday goods more expensive for consumers. Now let's discuss the impact or the effect of inflation in Malaysia. First of all, let's split it into three parts: effects on household, effects on businesses, and lastly, effects on the economy. So, effects on household, first of all, it will reduce purchasing power. Inflation erodes the value of money, making goods and services more expensive. For example, like we said before, essentials like food, fuel, and housing become costlier, reducing disposable income, and especially for low and middle income families like as B40 and also M40. Second, increased cost of living. Households face higher costs for daily necessities, education, healthcare, and transportation. This can lead to financial stress, especially for those with stagnant or slow-growing incomes. And lastly, impact on savings. High inflation reduces the real value of saving unless interest rates on saving accounts keep up with inflation, discouraging savings. So now, moving on to businesses. First of all, higher production costs. Inflation increased costs for raw materials, wages, and transportation, especially in industries reliant on imports. Second, uncertainty in planning. Businesses may struggle to predict costs and revenue during inflationary periods, which can delay investment and expansion decisions. And lastly, shift in consumer spending. With higher prices, consumers prioritize essential goods, potentially reducing demand for luxury or non-essential items such as Rolex watches and so on. And lastly, moving on to effects on the economy. First, decreased economic growth. High inflation can dampen consumer spending and business investment, leading to slower economic growth. Other than that, reduced foreign investment. If inflation leads to devaluation of the Malaysian ringgit, foreign investors may view the country as less attractive for investment. And lastly, increased interest rates. To combat inflation, Bank Negara Malaysia may raise interest rates. This can lead to higher borrowing costs for businesses and individuals, further dampening spending and investment. So, how to solve inflation? So, there are two types of solution: monetary policy and fiscal policy. Fiscal policy involves expansionary fiscal policy is when economy is in recession by increase the government expenditure and decrease tax, while contractionary fiscal policy is when economy is in inflation by decrease the government expenditure and also increase tax. For monetary policy, expansionary monetary policy is when economy is in recession, increase money supply and lower interest rates and increase aggregate demand. Government decrease the reserve requirement, decrease discount rate and buy bonds in open market. While contractionary monetary policy is when economy is in inflation, decrease money supply, high interest rate, decrease aggregate demand, and government increase reserve requirement, increase discount rate and sells bond in the open market. In conclusion, inflation is a key economic issue that affects the cost of living, business operations and government policies. Understanding its causes, effects and control measures is essential to manage its impact on individuals and the economy. So thank you for listening.